when it's your time to go, it's your time to go. And if
Right,
it's not your
right,
time to go, there will be
right.
divine intervention. My uncle was a door gunner in Vietnam, which is the people that shoot guns out of the helicopters. The average lifespan of a door gunner in Vietnam was about 90 seconds. They talk about that in Good Morning Vietnam or one of the Vietnam movies. It wasn't a fabrication, that's true. My uncle was not shot down not once, not twice, but three times. Not a scratch, not a broken bone, not anything, because it wasn't his time to go.
Welcome to the podcast that guides men to demystify and develop their intuition. I'm your host, Doug Bites. Let's dig into the science and expand your horizons. The last 2 days I've done 12, 13-hour days working, and I just haven't been able to have a topic come up for today. So an hour ago, I sat in meditation, just sat on my own for 20 minutes. And what I came up with was something that Jason just mentioned, like the words is the Day of the Dead. And I just thought today we
Mm.
might talk about death and dying, because my podcast episode that came out yesterday was with a gentleman who's 79 years old, and we talked about death a lot. And he's totally on board with death. He's like looking forward. He doesn't want to die. He's doing everything he can to stay alive. But he was talking about when we can accept death and we can plan it as part of our life, we can work back to now. It's take the fear away, things like that. So I just thought, in our Western culture, it's a taboo subject, and I like to be rebel. I like to talk about things that people don't like to talk about, and so I just thought, if anyone's got any particular things about, because I listen to a lot of podcasts about near-death experiences, and most that's how I found Mark, like, because he was on one of those podcasts, and I thought, I got to talk to this guy. Like, what he's got to say, I want to hear. So I'll open up the floor. Anyone want to start chime in on that subject? Trunnis, yep.
I am literally, I love going, I'm an adventurer. I love going anywhere. Love doing anything, but I love going to places that I know what I'm going into. It's funny. My risks are I want to know what I'm going into. I do believe in that, and there is going to be something after this, and I know that. Um, and my Christian faith says that there's a heaven, okay? But I don't know what that heaven looks like. So as a result, I'm going to be very, very honest. I am willing to die. I spent my time in the United States military. I know it can happen, but I'm afraid of it. I'm willing to do it. I just don't want to do it at any time. I mean, and it's just so messed up, when I see something that the next time it was a couple weeks ago, as a matter of fact. There was a comet that went through, and they said the next time this comet comes by, it's going to be like 21 something. And I'm like, shit, I'm not going to be here. And it really did mess me up that the next time something happens, there is no way I'm going to be here. And so death, even though I know it's going to happen, because of the vast unknown of it, I'm pretty much scared of it.
There you go.
Well, I hope I can ease your fears because no one dies.
Yeah, well, and just sorry to interrupt, Mark. Like I said, I did not know Mark was going to be on today, because he
Mhm.
hasn't been on for a
I
while with
usually
work
work. Yeah.
schedules, and then and Mark's had a near death experience, and I was just thinking, man, this is like, this is a so go, Mark, go.
Please go.
Oh my God. I
Yeah.
was, oh my God, that's crazy.
So yeah, I crossed over. I had a profound near-death experience, and death is an illusion. You just like right now, you're watching the Zoom channel. You just leave your body, and now you're going to watch the ESPN channel, but the Zoom channel is still there. You just your focus isn't isn't on the Zoom channel. It's going to be on the ESPN channel or whatever channel you turn into. But the soul is eternal, and you'll you'll make a decision as to whether you want to come back here or not, and you get to review your life, and you get to talk about where you excelled at, where you didn't. But I mean, there's no judgment, there's no hell. You're not gonna, no one goes to hell. We all go to heaven, not because of what we believe, but it's where we all came from. In fact, I just signed my first book contract with the Near Death Institute, and the book will be out in January, and it's about there's about 10 different authors that are contributing, one or two chapters about their NDEs. But so speaking of death or avoiding death and the hurricane here, so we have a coworker named Tommy, and Tommy kind of lives out in some of the remote areas around here got hit the hardest because some of them are out in the mountains and you really can't get to people, and some of them are still don't have power or water. And Tommy's in his house, and he kind of lives on the cliff, so to speak. And it was Thursday night just before because the storm came Wednesday night and it rained pretty hard, then it stopped. Then it just rained all day Thursday, but it wasn't until like Friday, like at 5 in the morning, where it was like, oh shit, this thing is big, bad, and nasty. And so Tommy, they didn't really have power or anything, but he just looks at his wife and he grabs her and he goes, we have to get out of this house now. 1 hour later, mud avalanche squashed his house. And then I had a guest the other night telling a story that his next door neighbor, his house didn't get hurt, but his next door neighbor, they were in bed sleeping, and the kids slept in the basement of the basement of the house. That's where the rooms were. And he woke up in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. and he just ran downstairs, grabbed the kids, pulled them out. About 45 minutes after that experience, the tree came crashing through and landed right on top of the beds where the kids were sleeping. It would have killed both of them. My own experience in that, something not that drastic, but when I was married in Sedona many years ago, my wife at the time and I, we woke up simultaneously at the same time. It was probably 2 in the morning, and we were both like, our back door is open. And I grabbed a baseball bat, not knowing what to expect, and I ran out, and sure enough, the back sliding door was wide open. And I don't know if I hadn't have woken up, if someone would have broken into the house. I mean, it's not exactly a high crime area, but still we literally woke up at the same time simultaneously, looked at each other going, the back door is open. And, sure enough it was, but, and to Trunnis's point, or when it's your time to go, it's your time to go. And if it's not your time to go, things like that will happen. There will be divine intervention. My uncle was a door gunner in Vietnam. He was shot down, which is the people that shoot guns out of the helicopters. The average lifespan of a door gunner in Vietnam was about 90 seconds. They talk about that in Good Morning Vietnam or one of the Vietnam movies. It wasn't a fabrication, it's true. My uncle was shot down not once, not twice, but 3 times. Not a scratch, not a broken bone, not anything, because it wasn't his time to go.
It's funny that you should say that because the U-2 pilot, you remember when the U-2 was shot down in Russia? So the U-2, there's a U-2 plane during the Cold War that was shot down over Russia. It was a spy plane. U-2 planes are probably, they swim and they swim. They fly in the stratosphere. So that's 80,000 feet, something like that up, right? And it was shot down by a Russian missile. Shot down. The pilot was recovered by the Soviet military without a scratch. Okay. So you're thinking you have a craft that was, first of all, flying in the stratosphere. Second of all, shot down by a missile. And the pilot was being held by Khrushchev himself. Okay. And he was released. It was a big embarrassment for the United States of America. And the pilot comes back to the United States and becomes a helicopter traffic pilot. The plane was 300 feet up. 300. Crashed, he died instantly.
Yeah.
And if it's, you're right, if it's not your time yet, it is not your time. So yeah.
So as Mark
Yeah.
said, that helicopter pilot, he just changed channels.
It
The,
just
the guy in the U2, he didn't change channels.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mark. Way
Wow.
ahead.
No, but the other thing, like, and I think it's important to remind people that, like, my uncle is a heavy gin drinker. He's an alcoholic, and I guarantee you that when he leaves his body, which could be any day now, first thing that he's going to do is he's going to go down to the bar and try to get himself some gin. I mean, just because you leave your body doesn't mean you exactly change. You're still kind of the same energy. You're still the same persona, and it takes a while to kind of snap out of it until you realize that you're not. But I mean, there is so much love on the other side for us. There's so much unconditional love, so much peace, so much compassion for us. I mean, unfortunately, we've been instilled to be afraid of death because of, quote, hell. I mean, hell was a village outside of Jerusalem where they burned garbage, and if you couldn't afford a proper burial, where you were placed in a shallow grave where the animals could easily gnaw up the flesh. And in fact, it didn't exist until the 16th century. I mean, I can go on, but this is our show. It's not my show. So,
Mark, can I ask you a question of
sure.
do you have any idea how long it sort of tends to take for someone to now choose their next body to go into for their next lifetime? How
Some
long are
people
you
don't.
tend to stay on the other side?
Some people don't. Some people stay. Just depends on, what your awareness is, what your level of consciousness is, and, what you're wanting to do. Some people like they'll die and they'll immediately come back. Other people might wait for a grandchild, an opportunity to be with a grandchild, so but some people kind of, that's what the Catholic Church calls purgatory, is when you're kind of in between. You don't go into the light, or you don't go into the next higher dimensional realms, but you know you and you're not in your body, you're not here, you're just in between states. And then a lot of it's and I know this is hard for the people, like, let's say that you're a wife, and in fact, I have a client who went through this recently. She lost her husband of 35 years, but she's very healthy, very, very strong. A lot of times their grief, their pain, their feeling alone, feeling sorry for themselves, keeps that person attached to them, so that they can't go to where they need to go. So, but it depends. There's no definite answer, because every individual is purpose, but people can stay there for what we call, years, if they're not ready to let go. Because again, you also, as above, so below, as within, without, you also have to let go when you're on the other side. Like when my dad crossed over, boy, he went through the light like that. He left immediately. And but he comes to my dreams every now and then. So but he and there's some people that hang around because maybe they left young children behind. That's a hard one. You have young kids, and you
Yeah.
die in a car crash, or whatever it may be. You die on this quote unexpectedly. You're going to hang around for a while. Yeah.
Mark, I'm just curious. You mentioned there your father comes to you occasionally in your dreams. And I remember when we did the interview, like, many months ago, you talked that when you were a teenager, particularly, your relationship with your father was challenging. How is it now when he visits you?
Well, it was better as I got older. My dad had a really hard time with me, that I crossed over, because he would tell me for years I had some type of satanic experience, and it wasn't, really real. And but now I realize that if I hadn't had such a holy roller, Jesus zealot, Southern Baptist Bible thumper as my father, I would have never delved into the history of religions and the history of Christianity to the extent I have, especially after my near-death experience. I mean, it really motivated me to really examine and look at those things. And now I mean, I have a wealth of knowledge when it comes to, I don't know everything, but I know I have a wealth of knowledge when it comes down to the history of Christianity and where it came from and how it evolved. And if I hadn't had a father who was such a Jesus zealot, I wouldn't have been able to, I wouldn't have done that, and it wouldn't have validated a lot of the historical information that talks about reincarnation, karma that were once originally part of Christianity and early tenets of Christianity. So, but I think we talked about this when I was on your podcast. My dad passed away. It'll be 10 years in December. And he said for a couple of years, he didn't think he was going to make his 75th birthday. Well, he would have turned 75 in February of 2015. So he missed it by 2 months. Well, around his birthday, when he would have been 75, he came to me in a dream and he said, Mark, you seem to be in a race to be perfect. You might want to get out of a race that has no finish line. Now, for a Bible thumper, that's a pretty profound, deep statement, you know. So yeah, you know, that's true. So, yeah, my relationship with my dad was challenging at times because not only was he you know, a Bible thumper and a holy roller, he was there's no other way to say it, but he was fucking batshit crazy. You know, he had an IQ off the charts, but he couldn't relate to anyone. So he was in his own little, you know, his own little world. And yeah, but and there were some pretty intense conversations. You know, he would. I remember one time he called and was talking about money. I said, Dad, and don't misinterpret this, but it's true. I said Ecclesiastes 18:9 says money answers all things. Because he always told me that money was the root of all evil, money would just ruin you. I said, well, actually the Bible says that it's the answer to all things. You know, no, it doesn't, Mark. You don't know what you're talking about. I said, get your Bible out right now. So he got the Bible out, read it, and he hung up the phone on me. So there are a lot of conversations that went that way, but you know, I think it comes down to making peace and realizing that that's just, you know, had nothing to do with me. That's just who he was, and vice versa as well. Kevin, I saw you nod your head a lot, so I would like to hear if you relate to that.
Yeah, very, very parallel to experiences I've had. And something you just touched on there at the end. Oh, like the continuation. I think that's the biggest thing. And there's actually a line from a geologist who is studying this formation in Scotland as far as the geologic processes of the earth. And I feel like that applies to us, where there's no vestige of beginning, there's no prospect of an end. So what we call death, I really view as it's a transition. It's stepping through a doorway. It's like you said, it's changing the channel, but the essence, that isness of who we are behind the labels, behind the roles, behind the trappings of life, that's the through line. That's the continuity.
Right.
So going back to the kind of what touched us off with what Trunnis was saying about that, like that uncertainty, or it's almost that I conceptually understand it, but I can't quite tactily wrap my head around it. I feel like that's a big challenge for a majority of the world, because belief comes in, because all of these different aspects of separation that get between us and that unconditional love, that get between us and our source, whatever label we call that, which I'm in complete agreement. My experience, what's waiting for us is unconditional love and acceptance, to the extent where it might get a little sickening. And that's why we choose to come back and have really messy human experiences, because that's a vacation from an eternity of unconditional love and acceptance. It's like, yeah, I want to
Get bored.
right. Yeah. Give me an abusive father and a neglective mom and a big brother who just beats me up all the time. Oh, that'll be good for, just that less than a snap of what a human life is. And so one thing that I guide is, we call it post-death consciousness work. And so it's guided visualization with the intention of arresting that fear or the uncertainty around either what that experience might be for us in the transition, or what's for us after the transition. And the other, so post-death consciousness work, and then shifting that perception or that view more into like an overview effect, where sometimes in meditation we start off at the ground, and then you see yourself sitting in meditation, and then you see the park you're in, and then you see the neighborhood, and you really pull back and pull back and pull back to get this grand overview where you get to that pale blue dot type of perspective. And for me, every one of these steps has brought me closer to a sense of oneness or wholeness that a lot of energies in the world have a vested interest in keeping us separate from, because then we're more beholden or reliable or reliant on things outside of ourselves to connect with that isness that's available for all of us. And the more that we can shift out of fear into maybe just open curiosity or even confidence, that really opens us up to be a lot more free in life. So we're not dealing with this kind of, pendulum swinging that towards the end of when's it going to come, this fear around it. And one thing I share is like, I've disclaimer, obviously we're talking about death, but the more that we can workshop these things in our imagination, in our mind, I feel the more successful we can have a relationship with it. So I've in these exercises, I've killed myself a dozen, 15, 20 times. And I've really moved through fear, which was the biggest albatross around my neck, the biggest boondoggle that was there for me. And the first time was really organically. I was 18, and I was in that transition. I heard somebody say recently that a lot of times people in adolescence, they'll get this kind of like call of the void, or this feeling of like, well, what if I wasn't here? And I heard a really great take on it, and that it's really just more of a setting down, or a quote unquote death of childhood as we move into adulthood. It's not meant to be literal. But I had that thought in my senior year in high school. I was like, all right, well, what if I wasn't here? And it scared the heck out of me, because I was like, oh, I thought things were thought we were on an upswing, went through a couple of really rough years, but I thought, we're going to college, we're doing good. Thought scared the hell out of me. And then this voice in my head was like, all right, tough guy, do it. You're tough enough to have these thoughts. What if I did something? What if I wasn't here? Do it. And I had no means of actually materially in the three-dimensional space doing it, taking steps towards that. So I was like, okay, do it in my mind, thought exercise. So I forced myself to go step by step in this mind movie, in this visualization, through the steps of taking that action, what it would feel like. And then unintentionally, I shifted into a space of post-death consciousness, which was utterly peaceful, utterly like wildly connected. No questions remained. No, there was no question that needed to be answered. There was no answer that needed to be given, because everything felt very solid and complete. And I mean, joyful, blissful, but not in any kind of a heightened way, just in a very just like amazing, like almost suspended animation, where like part of everything and apart from nothing at the same time. And then kind of came back into that first person view. But it was this opportunity to really challenge my views, challenge my beliefs, challenge my thoughts, and shift my relationship to the concept, to the event. It's been wildly powerful for me in my own life, and then with client work as well. And then you touched on it as well. Last thing, real quick, Mark. And you nailed it with I call it being tethered. If we transition, but then it's a traumatic, prolonged, painful. It can be something around the actual transition, or it can be if there's things left unsaid, unreleased. Exactly. So if we're carrying low vibrational negative emotions, fear, scarcity, shame, guilt, anger, terror, things like that, those are really the things that'll keep us stuck. And to your point, that it goes both ways. So as the one who is remaining in a physical body, that grief can tether a human energy. and vice versa, a non-corporeal or an energy that's already transitioned with those types of emotions can remain tethered to those of us that still remain, which create a whole host of issues for the physical body when we're experiencing those negative emotions that aren't ours.
One question. The people who have gone before us, do we ever see them again?
Yes.
Like when we go on the other side, are they going to be there waiting for us?
Yeah. So in the holographic nature of the universe and the holographic nature and the fractal aspect of the universe and of our reality, you are multidimensional. So you could have a grandfather that passed and he becomes like your guide, like with my own experience. And there could be an aspect of that of your grandfather that incarnates. And so they can exist at the same time. We would call it parallel lives or parallel universes. So, but yeah, I mean, they're going to be grandparents are going to be there. Your parents are going to be there. Maybe brothers and sisters that you've had, people that you had relationships with all your life. It's part of your, I call it your soul family. We tend to incarnate with about 20 to 30 individuals. And they tend to be like our siblings, our parents, our aunts and uncles. And like for me, um, before the hurricane, I went back to Iowa, and always, there's one or two people I always run into, people that I grew up with, people that I went to high school, but they're always the one or two, three same individuals all the time. Even if like years have passed, or what, like if I go back to Iowa every 2 or 3 years or whatever it may be, I always run into these same people. Those people are part of your soul family, or people. And so, but to answer your question directly is, yeah, they not only that, but they're aware of you. They will be aware that you're about ready to make your transition, and they will be around you. And in fact, in those last few days of your life, you might dream about them. You might hear their voice. You might sense them. So
That's
yeah.
funny. It's funny that you should say that because when my dad was dying, my dad would go to sleep. He'd get up and say, "Hey, I saw dad today. His dad, my grandfather."
Mhm.
Yep.
Or he was very close to his mother-in-law, and he said we had dinner. And or he would even go as far to say is and I'm sorry. I mean, I will say this because I am so uncertain about the other side, and my uncertainty and my fear and my ignorance leads to humor. Okay, I mean, it does, and so one day my dad was like, "Your grandfather's in here." I was like, "Okay, then I will go ahead and leave you two alone," and I don't think I want to be here for this conversation. You know what I'm saying? But and I said that to be funny, but in all aspects, I mean, and I do hear that quite often that when people are dying, they're seeing. I had a dream years ago. My grandmother, I was very close to my mother's mother. I was very close to her. And I used to go, I was stationed in Indianapolis, Indiana as a recruiter. And I did that because I can get close to my grandmother. I literally go back to Indiana, and it was maybe 4 months later, she has a stroke, debilitating stroke, like never talked again stroke. So 11 months into this, I mean, every single day I'd go visit her at the nursing home, blah, 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 blah. It was about maybe 4 or 5 days before my grandmother died. I go to sleep and I had a dream of my grandfather. That was his wife. Came up and we were in a garage. I have no idea where this garage was. And he's like, "Well, I'm here to go pick up your mom." And that's what he always used to call her. And he goes, "You better go see her because we're getting ready to leave." I kid you not. And it was 4 days later she died.
Yeah.
And he kind of came in and warned me, and it was weird because again I don't want to say that I saw something. I don't want to say I was at that other side. I don't want to say the other side was with me because again that's a when we start doing that, and then there's other questions that I have to ask. But it was odd that it happened like that.
Yeah.
I
And
don't
just
think
to
it's odd. I've
yeah,
experienced all my life.
Mhm. No. and
Yeah.
keep asking those questions.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's really a thinning of the veil, and
Yep.
with that can happen in very heightened experiences. So to your point, Mark, about the near-death experience, you had a very heightened, very non-physical experience can activate these higher sensitivities. So every single one of us is a medium. Every single one of us is clairvoyant. Every single one of us is clairaudient, clairsentient. We can all astral project. We can all, like the power of these vessels, of these earth suits we're in is amazing. So we can actually thin that veil through breath work, the holotropic breath work, activating the pineal gland and the vagus nerve, stimulating those areas, and get into these kind of out of body, you might say trance-like states, where we can really, as clearly as we are having conversations now, have conversations with those who we perceive has gone before us, those who we perceive as we may have lost. And what I've found is a really powerful and successful place to operate from is open and curious. And a lot of times in life, we're fed beliefs or we're handed beliefs, and then we rock around with just our hands stuffed with all of these beliefs that we got from elsewhere that tend to get in the way of the signal. And so that place is available for all of us. There's a great quote from a guy, brilliant thinker. He's a Renaissance man of the 20th century. His name's Buckminster Fuller. And one of his quotes is, seeing is believing is a blind spot in man's vision. And I absolutely love that, because our visual spectrum, light spectrum, I think it's like 0.9 or 0.7, like 0.7% of the entirety of the light spectrum. And same thing with our extrasensory perceptions. It's just the thinnest of veils, the thinnest of barriers of belief, of assumption, of these different things that we cultivate and carry with us in life that keep us separate from these more natural abilities to maybe not have it feel like so much of a loss or an abandonment or a monumental event, as opposed to, oh, dad's not here right now, but dad is always here and here and everywhere, everything everywhere all at once, more along the lines of always and forever.
Excellent. And I just want to quickly, Dr. Mark Cooper's just came in like 10 minutes ago. Mark, just to bring you up to speed, we decided today to talk about death and dying, and I didn't realize Mark Patterson was going to be here, because when I interviewed him many, many months ago, he'd had a near-death experience as a teenager. And so the conversation has evolved. And when Mark's episode went live yesterday, and a little bit of our discussion was about death and dying and things like that. So it's just to bring you in on what we've been chatting about.
It was easy to hear what you were talking about. How to go out light as a feather. So the conversation is exactly where it needs to be about the other. It isn't the other side. It's a bigger side. So I think you guys are doing good work. I love witnessing this. Carry on.
Okay. We will.
So I'm just gonna, since we were originally talking about the Day of Dead or Halloween. Halloween is All Hallows Eve. It's really not about wearing masks and costumes, but original holiday is Samhain, which is when the veil is the thinnest, and it's more found in Latin cultures and South America, where you're paying homage to those your elders and ancestors that have departed before you, and it's your day of celebration where you get to honor your ability to communicate with them, which is why it's called the Day of the Dead, or All Hallows Eve, or Halloween as we celebrate here in the United States, but it has nothing to do with giving candy out and wearing
So
goblin masks.
excuse my Aussie ignorance here. But is the Mexican Day of the Dead and Halloween the same day?
No, they're what, 2 or 3 days apart? Halloween,
I-
it's Halloween. Halloween is the
Day of the Dead
31st
is November 1st.
Yeah, it's the day
Okay.
after.
Yeah.
day after. Yeah.
Like, there you go. So it's funny because in my meditation an hour or two, or probably 2 hours ago, when I was trying to come up with a topic for today, that like the words Day of the Dead came to me. And when I got home late, very late last night, I was telling my wife yesterday I was driving out in past a rural property, and they had an old metal farm tractor, like just for a decoration, just inside their fence, and they had a skeleton sitting in it, and they had about another dozen skeletons all around their front yard because not mmany people decorate here for Halloween, so it really sort of stood out, and it made me think of the Day of the Dead, and I thought, oh, that's because there's a cartoon came out a couple of years ago about it, and that's the first time I'd even heard about it. Like, being in Australia, we have a different side of things we see and hear about, and I thought, yeah, like celebrating those who've gone and who've moved on is probably a pretty cool thing, because typically here we don't like to talk about death and dying and that sort of thing, but I like my wife, both of her grandmother lived to 94, her grandfather lived to 100, and she adored them. And they lived quite close to us for the last 30 years of their lives, and we saw them a lot. And, she doesn't like talking about death and dying, but if we talk about her grandparents, she'll keep talking because she loves to, that conversation. And so, yeah, to celebrate them once a year, like apart from their birthdays and things like that, like that, is, I think, it's awesome. Yeah.
So Doug, do you guys do like a harvest celebration or anything down in Australia? No?
Nah, no. We have a lot of public holidays for a lot of things, but certainly not a harvest thing or anything like that. No, no.
Mark, do you sorry, question, do you I don't know if you have read the Carlos Castaneda books, and I'm thinking of
Mhm.
Journey to Ixtlan, and Journey to Ixtlan, there's a chapter called Death as is an Advisor. And you know how Don Juan in the book talks about this idea of death is always there watching you. And the way they describe it, in those books, is that death is always an arm's length away to your left and can sort of tap you on the shoulder at any time. But I don't know if that resonates with you if you read those books, or if anyone else has read those books.
I'm somewhat familiar with his information, his books. I don't know if death is always an arm's, just right there waiting
To
for
your
us.
left, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
It's a bit maudlin,
yeah.
but
I it's my understanding, based on my near experience and what I've been told and what I've read a lot, is that we have 5 exit points, and they are throughout different parts of our lives. And so obviously one of my major exit points was when I was 16 years old, but I chose not to. And, a few years ago, my mom had a pretty intense medical procedure, and they flat out told her that she basically had about a 30% chance of dying. And it was up to her whether she was wanted to do the procedure or not. She said yes, and she didn't die, but that would have been one of my mom's, exit points. But that is and they can happen early in life, middle of life, or they can all be geared towards the end of life. But I believe that I believe for whatever reason, I believe that's true, that we have about 5 exit points.
Or when you were on the other side, or
That just has, studying this stuff for 30 some years and having conversations with people, but it mainly comes from astrologers,
right.
specifically Western astrologers. I don't know if it's so much in Vedic or Hindu astrology, but it's definitely a concept that comes up a lot in Western astrology with your natal chart.
Anyone else want to chime in on the not
Just
the
a
other
quick
side, but the
question.
bigger side.
Sorry, not to take another big question, but you guys talk more about this in the podcast? Because I can't believe we had that and the experience, and I can't believe you have a podcast.
Well,
So I can't wait to.
if you go back, like Mark, how long ago was it?
Yeah.
That was like 6+ months ago, wasn't it?
Probably about 6 or 7 months ago. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
just
okay,
scroll back,
okay.
look for Mark Patterson. Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's a lot of episodes ago, and you'll find it for sure. Yeah,
It's amazing.
yeah, it's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. Murphy, I mean, if those of you are interested in my story, I just gave it to Trunnis, but it's Mark, my name, but you have to have a hyphen or a dash in between. So it's mark-patterson.com, mark-patterson.com. If you don't do the hyphen, you'll get a famous jeweler in New York City. So, and there's several podcasts I've done over. Just really weird because I did conferences and expos all over the world from 97 to 2017. And I stopped doing them because I got frustrated or tired with being told of how amazing my story was, and then nothing really ever came of it. And then last May, I was invited to be on the Jeff Mara podcast after not talking about any of it for 7 years, right? 6 years, 7 years. And then it just snowballed, one podcast after the other. In fact, I've got another one tomorrow night, and which is, I mean, the second time I've been on Love Cupboard podcast. And then I'm doing one out of Australia on the whatever election night here in the United States, and that out of Brisbane, Australia.
Brisbane.
Yeah.
You got to
Brisbane.
practice that. Brisbane, not
Brisbane.
Brisbane. It's not
Yeah.
Melbourne.
Melbourne.
Brisbane. Melbourne. Brisbane.
Well, it's like here we have a Lancaster, New York, but we
Mhm.
have a Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And if you
Yeah.
say it Lancaster, you're in so much trouble. But we aren't from Lancaster, New York. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah. So
Yeah.
Well, it's like, yeah, Soho is south of Houston, not Houston Street in New York City. Houston Street.
It's funny.
You know, I will
Oh.
say this one thing that I did start off, and it's funny how it comes full circle. I did say that I'm afraid of the next, or the bigger side. But one thing that you two said is that there are people over there that I really do want to see again. And I do want to see them, and I cannot wait till that day comes where I get to see them again. And that gives me a little bit like, hey, maybe it's not bad, and I'll wait for everybody else when.
Yeah.
And just on that, Trunnis, I know when Trunnis and I had the interview, most of you don't know that, or however many years ago it was, one of Trunnis's daughters died tragically one night. And I said to him, do you mind talking about it? Because I had a friend many, many, many years ago, and when she was 5, her 8-year-old sister got ill and died. And the friend was staying at our house, and I started to ask her about what she remembered of her older sister. And my wife's looking at me like with daggers, like, how dare you like upset our friend by talking about her older sister who died? And so I said to her, do you mind talking about this? And she said, Doug, I love it. She said, nobody ever wants to talk about. And she goes, I don't really remember my older sister much because I was only 5. She said, but no one will ever have a conversation with me about it. And I've started to realize, and Trunnis answered the same way. He loves talking about his daughter. So, yeah, it's a thing. For me, it's people who've lost someone close, they want to talk about it. And it's let them talk, bring it up, let them talk,
And I'm not using this as a selfish plug, but on this, not this Friday, but next Friday, I have a book coming out called Stories of Children Lost. And it'll be out, and it's actually written by, it's an anthology, me and 11 other parents that lost their children 11 different ways are writing this book. So this is a book where people who have lost their children can go, because there is a long period of darkness after you lose a kid. I mean, it is long. It is, and it's funny how, you know, and I hate to say this, people who lose their kid to suicide almost become suicidal themselves, and people who lose children to homicide, I don't have to finish that question. Or, you know, and that's what happens. I mean, there's a rage, there's something that goes on in somebody. So I wrote this book to make sure that people can understand and control that, those feelings, and not only control but grieve, and it's okay to grieve. But when I listen to when I listen to you, Mark and Kevin especially, the next level of hope that you guys gave me today, is astounding, and I don't know how to, uh, thank you for that, but it does, you know, it's comforting,
It's
to
a,
say the least.
it's o it's okay to stand out. It's okay to outshine others. It's okay to talk about what you're doing to empower others. I know as a kid, I was always faster than other kids, but I would always let other kids win so that I would, quote, feel better about myself. And what I've learned over the years is, you know, to stop doing that. You know, it's, you know, you have a voice and your voice is meant to be heard. You're a wonderful human being with so much to share, and we get lost in, you know, so you know, go put your name of your book and, you know, send it into the chat, and, you know, don't shy away
Right.
from that. It's okay to shine brighter than others, because that's exactly what, you know, the others, the quote, people that are in charge, they don't want us to shine our light. They want us to play small. And we're at the point in on the earth and the evolution of humanity where we can't play small anymore. The consequences are too potentially too great.
Absolutely. When the book comes out, I'll make sure I send the link. The link will be out Friday. I don't have the link yet, but I'll make sure
Yeah.
you guys get it. Absolutely.
Please do, definitely.
Yeah, pop it in our messenger group for sure.
And, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Roger that. We'll do.
Yeah.
We'll do.
Yeah. Any
And
more
there-
comments or on the
Yeah, I
topic?
just I guess it kind of shoehorns in, but there doesn't need to be any defined day or place or time in which we do honor those that have gone before us or that we look to connect. And I'm always fascinated by, again, that if we stay open and curious and we ask our loved ones for a sign, that can be a really powerful way to get a deeper understanding of the, you know, that broader picture of that greater space beyond. It can also help with that, to kind of ease some of that uncertainty or fear or whatever's there around any experience we had. I found that exercise profound with a number of different friends and family members that have gone before me. And it's a win-win, because one, we get the benefit of maybe getting that little twinkle of the eye, that little nudge, or that little, hey, yep, you're good, everything's all good. And we get the additional benefit of the only way we're going to connect with those is to be very present in life. Be in the moment, stay out of the past, stay out of the future. What's here for me now? I had an example. I was asking for a sign, and usually I just leave it open. And this time I got specific because I was testing it. I was playing around with things. So I said, if you're okay, if everything's there, I'm going in the right direction, please show me a white feather. And I was like, okay. You know, suspended disbelief. I'm like, hey, I'm open to it. And we've got like a down couch. And so the next morning I walk out and there's this tiny little white pin feather. And I looked down, I was like, okay, that's too easy. Keep going, but like really let me like make it obvious this time. So I'm out running errands, and I'm in the States on the left-hand drive. I'm in a left-hand turn, so we have to wait for traffic to go before we can turn. And pull up to the stop, and I was looking at a map, or I was picking something up off the floor or something. Get back, and I look, and the truck in front of me has it's a decal memorial across the entire window of the truck, 2 giant angel wings with defined feathers all the way down. And so I look up and I see just this like wall of white feathers in front of me, even though it's an illustration. I was like, okay, I'll stop asking for more of that. So it's like, oh, that little one was enough. Here's the big drop in the bucket for you. No, but those are ways that I've really found solace. I've found comfort, found more ease, especially with the really painful ones.
When so my grandson, my daughter's son lives with me, and I have custody of him. And I was in Indiana when I got custody. I live in North Carolina now. And the chances of a grandparent, especially if there's still a living parent around, to get custody of a child is like 2% in the state of Indiana. 2. Now, the father that was around, the first thing he did after my daughter died was he ran to the Social Security office to see if he can get a Social Security check. Didn't care. The kid, my grandson, stayed at my house the whole time, and he was going to have custody. I was taking care of everything. So pretty soon I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to have to go out and make it legal, because if something goes down or something goes wrong, So I go and go to court knowing that this is probably, I have a 98% chance of losing. So I spent thousands of dollars on trying to get custody. And the night that we had our final hearing, I'll never forget, I am asleep and I have a dream, but this is the only dream that I ever felt I felt something. I dreamed that I go up. I'm walking down a street and I'm shot up. And I remember going into the sky. And as I'm going into the sky, there was like a black, thin veil wall. Anybody see the movie Superman? Remember where the three villains in Superman 2 were like kind of
In
stuck in that little,
that glass
yeah.
pane. Yeah.
So I passed this pane that kind of reminded me of that. And I'm like, I don't want to go in there, right? And so I keep on going up, and I go to this, it looks like a park pool. And there's a whole bunch of teenagers just hanging out and just having a good old time. And as I go up there, I see me and my grandson look at each other. We kind of give each other an eye. He walks away. Okay. And I knew that he was okay. But then my daughter was right behind, and she's like, "Hi, Dad." I'm like, "Hey, how you doing?" She goes, "I just wanted to give you a hug, but you're not supposed to be here. But everything's good." And I fell. So when I come back down, I go in the backyard. And when my daughter died, they had a flower arrangement that had a willow tree. Now, the funny thing is, I cut one of the branches on the willow tree, and that willow tree is still growing in the yard here in Asheville. And so, um, it is. But when I go back, but when I first had it, when I first came in, I was like very protective of it because it was a sapling. Don't touch it. I put the tomato ring around it. Don't
Yeah.
get near it. And so when I come back down, there was a branch that was broken on the tree. Now, I didn't land on the willow tree, but I got mad. The end of this dream, I walk into the house with the willow tree branch in my hand saying, "Who did this?" Right? And then I wake up. So I go to the court. I go to court. And when I go to court, I go in there, and clearly, you all know the verdict. I won. Okay. So me and my daughter's mother are driving back home. Now we're divorced, and we're driving back home, and I'm sitting there telling her about this dream. And I look back at the tree. I swear to you, as long as I'm breathing, there was a branch that was broken on that sapling. But the branch, instead of it being on the ground, it was laying on the side of the tree up so I could see it. I still have that branch. I mean, it was
I
like,
love
yeah, there was some shit that happened last night. I just want you to know, here's the proof. And it was the weirdest thing. It freaked me out. I still have that branch.
And had that branch not broken, would you have transplanted the tree from Indiana to North Carolina?
Absolutely not. No, that tree is now in 2 different states right now. And
Right.
when I sold the house that I lived in, I asked the people, I said, please do not cut that tree down. If you cut that tree down, just tell me and I will come get more branches, but don't cut it down.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
Very powerful.
that's
Very powerful.
yeah.
All right. Well, we're just about to hit the 1 hour mark. Any final comments or thoughts?
I cannot wait to meet you, Doug. You better be in Sydney. I'm flying all the way over there in March.
When? In March. Yeah, I'll be there.
March.
That's that.
All right, good to go.
Nice.
Or you
All
can
right.
fly up to where I am. I'm an hour flight from Sydney. I can fly to you. You can fly to me. Either way, we'll be there.
You know, we're gonna be. I'm not gonna fly all the way across the world just to be there for a couple of days. So I might go up there. All right.
Mate,
I'll
I've
drive
got
up
a
there.
very, very cute little Airbnb on my property. It's about 150 feet from the house. It's got its own little
All right.
sauna and spa. And March is a beautiful time of the year, the end of
Yeah,
summer.
I think I might have to come up there.
Yeah.
Mate,
I think I might
come
just
on
go
up.
up there.
You can just stay there complimentary, not a problem at all.
Roger
So,
that. That sounds like a plan. And
Yeah.
I'll
Or-
drive up there too.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a 10 or 12 hour drive or a 1 hour flight. Yeah.
You know, I think I'll drive the 10 hours. I mean, just to see the countryside. It'd be beautiful.
Well, yeah, it's true.
Take
That's true.
take the
Yeah.
scenic route. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
the
I will.
scenic route. Yeah, it's along the ocean. Yeah, so we're all
Oh yeah,
we're on the east coast.
Yeah.
You'll be a reasonable chunk of it'll be along the ocean. A little bit goes inland, a little, but yeah,
Roger that.
it's great.
All
Any
right.
of you decide to come to Australia? Let me know. You can see the view out the window.
Yeah, that's why I want to go.
I'm 25 minutes from the ocean, but inland a bit. You know, it's a good spot. Come on
Sounds
down.
great.
I love it.
Come on down.
Thank you, guys.
That's not
Yeah.
Price is Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
All right. Thanks,
Have a
guys.
good night.
Very
Yeah.
insightful
Thank you.
conversation. Thanks for all
Thanks,
your
everybody.
input. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we're at the end of another thought-provoking episode. Remember to subscribe so you'll be alerted to new episodes. I want to say thank you to the men who are joining me on this journey of intuitive development. I truly hope our time together has expanded your reality and reinforced trust in your ever-reliable gut feeling. Embrace your intuition. It will not lead you astray. Until next time, stay tuned, stay curious, and trust your gut.